Now, there's been many feats throughout our lifetime. The discovery of fire, the development of the wheel, right? Minor when compared to the feats of a true king, Saber. So for those of you who have been following the channel, you'll know that Saber is one of my favorite characters. She's also my favorite heroine from Fate Stay Night. Today we're going to talk about some of her feats throughout the series, and as an ambassador for the Saber stance, I insist that we do her justice. Before we jump off into the video, I wanted to mention the release of my first merch product. Make sure you guys check that out if you can. From left to right, it says honor, wisdom, and devotion, just because I feel like those are some of the most important things while we're here. And on the back, of course, you have the Kodo meme in full effect in all of his glory. Now let's get it. To start us off, we're going to be taking a look at one of the feats regarding Saber's speed. During the fight against Medusa, it was stated that both servants scaled a skyscraper that was 50 stories in an instant. In the real world, it is the NTT Makuhari building. It was originally 26 floors, but in the story, the author actually doubled the building in size. We know this to be true because Shiro took the elevator up to the 40th floor, and then he emphasized how he had to run up the other 10. Since we know that Saber and Medusa scaled the building in an instant, this means that both servants are well on their way to Mach speed in terms of traveling. Not to mention that Medusa was at an advantage here, since we know that she's the type of servant that prefers these advanced positions. Saber, on the other hand, was unhindered by her approach and still showed the best of her prowess when it really boiled down to it. She then proceeded to dodge Medusa and her familiar Pegasus on a rooftop where she had absolutely nowhere to run several times. Following up these acrobatics, Saber incinerated them both in one foul swoop of her Excalibur, and Pegasus was a divine beast on top of that. Now, I do want to point out that both servants were underpowered here. Medusa wasn't at her full potential because she was under Shinji, but Saber also wasn't at her full potential because she was under Shiro. Nonetheless, they had the same handicap and Saber still emerged victorious. In the Heaven's Field route, things were a bit different. While both characters were servants under Sakura at the time, Saber was the one that had access to the immense mana supply on her side. Saber is just as strong as she was before, she just has more energy to fight with. But that's not the point that we want to look at. The point here is that both servants were at their peak, and despite that being the fact, the story flat out says that in terms of technique, strength, and of course, magical energy, Ryder doesn't stand a chance, and if she just so happened to mess up her plan, she would have died instantly. Now let's bring it back to a classic, the grand battle against Gilles de Rais in Fate Zero. First of all, we find out that she knows how to walk on water due to having the blessings from the fairies of the lake. She had no idea about the F-15 jet that Lancelot took over, but her instinct skill came in clutch and gave her the foresight to know the damage that it was capable of. It then tells us by good command of footwork, Saber can rival a jet fighter in terms of speed. In the real world, that same jet that Lancelot took over can go up to 1,875 miles per hour in terms of speed. She easily dodges Lancelot's bullets from that jet and could even deflect them if she wanted to. This means that her feat alone brings her up to Mach 2.5 in terms of her speed. And while a couple of bullets for a servant of her caliber is like throwing Tic Tacs, Lancelot was seeping his magecraft into every bullet that he shot. Each shot could have been fatal, added on to the fact that he was using the M61 autocannon, which can fire up to 12,000 bullets in a minute because of his magecraft. So Saber is dodging thousands of fatal bullets at Mach 2.5 speeds, and honestly, Lancelot wasn't even what she was worried about. She was worried about Gilgamesh. Insane. Now let's get into one of Saber's phantasms, invisible air. By normal standards, invisible air is used as a sheath to conserve Saber's power, since just wielding Excalibur can take a vast amount of her energy. But what we also come to find is that it has a lot of manipulations and can also be used as a projectile. In the Heaven's Field route, Saber took heed to the tactics that Assassin was on. She knew that he was only trying to unnerve her, so she used invisible air against him instead. Once she combines invisible air with her skill instinct, she gets protection from majority of projectiles. With this in mind, she was able to dodge 40 daggers from Assassin with no problem. She also has extraordinary power. A good example of this is during the Fate route when she fought against Heracles. She was able to channel enough energy and use Caliburn to kill Heracles 6 times over in one hit. And that was Caliburn. That wasn't even the real Excalibur, which is infinitely stronger than that. This is the definitive power gap that I was talking about, where Emilia was able to kill Heracles on 6 different occasions. Saber was able to kill him 6 times at once. In the UB-Dub route, Cheryl mentions that the fight against Heracles was her 3rd one in that same day. This tells us that even at her lowest point, with several wounds, she still refuses to fold. And she doesn't have a skill that lets her ignore fatal damage like Ku or Heracles. She's going off of sheer willpower. Another thing that we have to note is that she goes on to take one of Heracles' lives by releasing Excalibur inside of his body, going back into invisible air. Nasu himself stated in an interview that when Saber is using invisible air, it only represents a modicum, 8% of her true strength in swordplay. This means that whatever Saber is doing with invisible air, she's actually 12 times stronger than that. She doesn't even take y'all serious. What are we even talking about here? Then in the aftermath of this fight, she was able to heal her wounds in an hour due to the effects of Avalon. And lastly, in Heaven's Field, she was giving Heracles that work. Again, the point was that once she gained access to a better master, she was smacking this man. And Heracles is nice. Another thing that we have to pay homage to is her tact. From the very beginning of her fight with Ku, Saber purposely left an opening to make Ku believe that she dropped her guard, when in fact, the moment that he tried to stick his neck out, she came back with the haymakers. I mean, she was nearly falling on the ground trying to give this man the business. My boy Ku was like, whoa, time out. Disengage. I don't like these odds. Looking at her instinct skill, we know that Saber gains a 6th sense during battle that's almost akin to her seeing into the future. By combining this with her A-rank luck, she was able to dodge Ku's phantasm, which otherwise would guarantee a fatal outcome. We also see her use this against Sasuke. At first, Saber had a hard time getting in on Sasuke's fighting style, but once she acquired the experience through battle, she was able to beat him using the instinct skill. She dodged a reality warping phantasm and outmaneuvered a master swordsman in terms of speed. Sasuke even mentions during the Fate route that his sword would slice the head of someone with average skill, implying that Saber has to be no less than exceptional for her to still be alive. Next, we have to talk about her skill, Prana Burst. In Fate Zero, Saber showed us a variant of telekinesis where she fused the armor that would go on her body onto a motorcycle to strengthen its efficiency. At the same time, she added in her prana burst, which broke the law of physics and had her pushing nearly 250 miles per hour. She was able to keep up with Iskander at massive speeds while doing sharp turns and fending off his obstacles, simply because her dexterity is just that high. She outrode an actual rider, and that's not even her class. Even when Iskander tried to slow her down, her skills and her noble phantasm allowed her to cut through a slab that was implied to weigh several thousands of pounds. She then tactfully used those same obstacles as a ramp to cut the distance between Iskander literally moments after it appeared. And finally, she goes on to incinerate Ryder's phantasm in one blow. In her other battle against Lancelot, you see her pull off very similar things. She was able to casually flip a truck, which we know weighs several tons, and use it as a shield against Lancelot. She then strong-armed the entire truck across the garage like it was made of jello, and used it as a distraction for a preemptive strike at that. This was just what she accomplished in the later half of the fight. Prior to this, Saber was able to dodge Lancelot's bullets at point blank range. She dodged a missile from the same distance, and she escaped the explosion without a scratch on her. And let's not forget to mention that her endurance is through the roof. From the story, we know that Medea is capable of using magecraft from the Age of Gods. Saber was able to nullify her spells every time she came into contact with her. In the Fate route, in the UB-Dub route, and even in Heaven's Field, she blocked her spells out and smoked her in one shot. Her resistance goes as far as negating one of Kirisugu's command spells when he tried to get her to destroy the Grail. With all these feats and all this power, it might lead you to try to say that Saber is some type of Mary Sue, but we all know that that isn't true. In the UB-Dub route, the situation with Kazuki defined a very specific drawback for her. Other than using Rule Breaker, the efforts that Medea made against Saber were harmless. However, once Medea reinforced that same magecraft into Kazuki and used him as a vehicle, the story shows us that indirectly her magecraft can serve as a real problem. Another downfall that I really don't want to talk about, by the way, is the time that she got scraped by Gilgamesh. This was their first battle in the Fate route. The story tells us that Aya, at least at that time, had greater magical energy than Excalibur. And the worst part about it is that she had invisible air off when it happened. Other than having a better master, and Avalon of course, Saber was the closest to her full potential that she could have gotten. And she still got bodied. Oh no, you hate to see it. Now, while we're on the subject, let's talk about her second fight with Gilgamesh, when she used Avalon and got her revenge. We know that it's a pseudo-reality marble that puts her in a bounded field and protects her from anything in this world, up to the 6th dimension. It is the highest level of defense in this world, and it can't be opposed by anything, even the 5 true magics. And if that wasn't enough, Avalon is a divine construct. It's an actual relic, which means Saber doesn't have to waste magical energy manifesting it into the world. But what she gains from having this relic is tremendous. It can heal nearly any wound. It was effortlessly able to block Aya the second time around, which is not only one of the strongest weapons in the verse, but it's literally a weapon that was created to warp reality, and Gil still couldn't reach her. This time around, Gil was the one that got folded. Next, we have to talk about Excalibur. What has to be brought to attention is that on top of having invisible air, Saber also has 13 oaths on Excalibur that release a layer of its power, and she can only reach these layers if she abides by these oaths. It's often misconceived that Proto-Arthur and Goddess Artoria are the only ones that have these seals, when in fact, in her interlude, Saber tells you that her blade has these exact same restrictions. We also have to mention that Excalibur was created as the sword of promised victory. And if you take a look at Fate Extella, it tells us that Excalibur was the same weapon used to defeat the White Titan Safar eons ago. To put that into perspective, Safar is the same creature that ravaged all of Earth and destroyed all the early civilizations. The only thing that was able to put it down was Excalibur, and Saber is now in possession of that very same weapon. This is what you're dealing with if she can break her seals. That's bigger than her taking out Jill's giant horror that everybody else made a big deal about in one shot. That's bigger than her doing a city-wide Excalibur blast that vanquished all the nearby shadows in Hollow Ataraxia. And it's even greater than her and Gawain beating the dragon Vortigern after fighting him for several hours in the Garden of Avalon. Next, we gotta talk about her adaptability. Several times throughout the story, Saber has shown the ability to adapt to different situations. Using invisible air against Diarmuid and angling her body to avoid a fatal hit at the very last second when Gil had her upside down by the foot in their second fight. She used her other leg to kick this man with the quickness. She kicked the stimulus check out this man's pocket. Oh my goodness. And of course you have times like UB-Dub when Ren mentions that Saber lured Heracles to the graveyard on purpose as a method of survival. She also did it to keep her master out of harm's way. Lastly, I want to talk about her greatest downfalls. If I had to put them collectively, I would say it is her seals, her impulsiveness, and her character itself. While the seals do allow her to conserve power, it also means that she'll never get to fight at her full potential under normal standards. The only thing she can do is work with however many seals she has released. For her impulsive side, you can tell that Saber really likes to fight. She might jump headfirst into a situation that she really doesn't need to be in. Using invisible air against Diarmuid was tactful, but it's definitely not worth putting yourself in a position where you might get killed. And for her character itself, I do love her character, but it also seeps into her fighting style. For example, her honor. When she fought against Diarmuid the second time, she deliberately handicapped herself to honor the fact that he broke her curse. That's just who she is. She's just solid like that. On the flip side, there was absolutely no reason for this. It's a war. Anything goes. Honor is fine as long as you're fighting someone honorable, like Diarmuid. But if you're fighting against somebody like Curse Arm Hassan, who's out here jumping the whole cast with the shadow, honor is about to look real bad for you. So what does she take overall? Roman, who we know to be Solomon, a top tier servant and a former grand servant, also spoke highly upon Saber's name. Even he mentioned in her interlude that her spirit origin is one that can hang with the best of the best. I gotta serve my girl with the A rank overall. Having Avalon and Excalibur alone puts her well over the majority of the other servants. Couple this fact with her instincts, her destructive power, and her ability to adapt to pretty much any given situation, and you got yourself some real trouble. Let me know what you guys think. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Follow me on Twitter for more updates on the channel, and I will be back with more Tight Moon content. It is your boy Tsiah. I'm out.